Hey everybody, welcome to this live stream about Tron, the original Disney movie from 1982. And this is our way of celebrating that. I'm just going to share the link really quick, even though for some reason the thumbnail shows something that's not Tron related at all. I guess that's just how some of these things go sometimes. So that's all right. But joining me is Brian. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm getting along fine. And why would I ask you to come and chat about Tron with me on a stream like this?
Well, you'd probably ask me because it's my all-time favorite movie that I've seen somewhere in the ballpark of 200 plus times.
Oh, that's a lot of times. That's probably more times than the director himself, Steven Leisberger. I would
No
guess.
doubt, yeah. I heard directors don't like watching their own movies sometimes.
Right. Yep. And so, yeah, that's probably true because they've already seen every part of it and everything. So we've got Blake in the chat. Hey, Blake, how's it going? You fellow nerd? Yes, we are definitely going to be nerding out about Tron here, the nerdiest movie of the 1980s, possibly more nerdy than Revenge of the Nerds and Goonies and E.T. and anything else that I can think of. Now, we will talk about Tron Legacy as well. We'll talk about pretty much everything Tron, anything that you want to talk about Tron, Brian, as well. Today, July 9th, is the 40th anniversary of the release of the 1982 Tron film. And I know Blake is one who said that he never seen the original movie, he's seen Tron Legacy. And so
Haven't seen the original Tron?
Yeah, that's what
Blasphemy.
he said. No, Blake or anybody else watching this, if you're a youngin' and you never saw it, then it's on Disney Plus. It's available been released on disc, Blu-ray, DVD, VHS, Laserdisc, all that stuff. So there's plenty of ways to find it. But I guess where you said you've watched it 200 times, do you remember when was the first time you saw Tron?
So, in order to tell you that, let's see, we'd have to set the Wayback Machine to the mid-'80s. Brian, a lovely young man looking for movies to watch with his mother. No, in all seriousness, we lived in Burbank, California, and my mom and I would frequent a rental shop. Remember those?
Yeah. Here there was a supermarket called Albertsons where they had a lot of rentals, which I remember sometimes going over there prior to Blockbuster Video becoming a big thing, at least in our area. And so, remember that?
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you the name of the video store. It was so long ago, but we would go every at least once a week to look for VHS movies to watch. And so, unfortunately for me, I didn't start. I would have loved to have said, "Hey, I saw it in the theater" and stuff like that. But no, that was just like 1982. That was like way too early. So, so probably somewhere in the mid-'80s, I went to video shops with my mom, and I saw Tron there, and I was already crazy for arcade games and stuff like that. So any movie that had to do with video games, computers, anything technological, I was into.
Yeah.
So I rented Tron, and I immediately fell in love with it. It was exactly like
it was your movie
subject matter I wanted in a movie. Yeah, it was like the perfect mix, and I was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" So I rented it once, thought it was great. I must have watched that tape like 10 times just on that day alone. Yeah, it was like on loop, you know.
Right. As long as you rewound it before you returned it, so you didn't get a fine, a rewind
I'm
fee.
very kind and rewind. Don't worry about that.
Another first world problem that the youngins would never understand.
Yep, be kind, rewind. Yep. So um, it got to the point where every time we'd go to that video shop, I would just rent that movie over and over and over and over and over again. And so after like the 30th time of renting that movie, the video shop was like, "Would you just like to take the movie?" You know, but you kind of paid for it like 20 times. So yeah, they actually just gave us the movie because of how many times I rented it. Yeah,
nice.
And it was the nice one too. It was the old style white clamshell VHS.
I remember those.
Yep. And a lot of Disney movies around that time had the clamshell design.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. And for me,
but that's my first experience.
Gotcha. For me, it's a little hazy. Like, I believe the first time I saw it was on the Disney Channel, as at the time my mom had gotten cable because my dad was serving over in the Gulf War as a medic, and she needed to stay on top of it. And this was, of course, before the days of the internet, where people had, or normal people had, regular access to the internet. And so we got cable, and that included Disney Channel. But I had encountered Tron prior to that, and I'm not sure which was the first time. It was either at a friend's house where he had this little booklet where it told the story of the movie. They used to do that, especially in the 80s, where they would release these books for major motion pictures, and they would essentially spoil the whole movie. But they were cool. They had artwork, and sometimes they had little differences from the movie. I believe the Tron one had one or two minor but interesting differences. And so I can't remember how old I was when I first came across that. But the first time that I really remember it was when I was at an arcade, and it was for a birthday party, and we were given a few tokens, not many. And I spent most of them already. I think I played Akari Warriors and a couple of other things that I didn't do very well on. And as I remember walking around this arcade, this was at a place called the 49th Street Galleria. It was a family entertainment center. They had a lot of different attractions, but their arcade was super 80s. And it had plenty of games that back then weren't classics yet. They were brand new. Maybe there were a few that were a few years old, but it was very dark. I don't remember there being any overhead lighting at all, maybe some black lights, and just the ambience. You're welcome. From the games themselves. But I remember as I was coin fishing, trying to find coins in the coin reject slots, coming across this amazing looking game called Discs of Tron, and I had no idea what it was. This was already a few years after Tron came out. I was a mere babe when Tron came out, so even if I went and saw it in theaters, I wouldn't have remembered it. But anyways, I came across this video game, Discs of Tron, and it was mesmerizing. And I think I was able to get a coin and try it. I sucked at it from what I remember because the controls were a little bit complicated for a little kid to understand, as you had a joystick and you had the spinner controller, and the spinner could also move to change the direction of your discs. But just the look of it was incredible. And I already was in love with video games. Now, this was also the first time I had ever visited an arcade, so I was just, I guess, a little bit overwhelmed by this place where you had all these video games in these giant cabinets, and they looked more amazing than anything I'd ever seen at home, playing on my Texas Instruments 99.4A computer, or on my friend's Atari 2600 or his NES, etc. And
well, I'd have to imagine it was a pretty intimidating machine, having to step inside it.
Yeah. It was not the environmental version, and so I think they'd removed the back, and so I do remember that.
Oh, okay.
And I also think I was small enough where I needed to find a stool so that I could get up high enough to reach the controls. So this is how young I was, but it was sometime in the late 80s. Now, as Blake mentions in the chat, he is surprised as a big fan of Tron that I never picked up the arcade machine. So, to explain that, well, I guess backtracking a little bit here. When I finally saw the movie, which was, I think, a couple of years after this first experience of coming across Discs of Tron, it was kind of like what I experienced with you, what you experienced with the movie, where just something in it really clicked with me. It connected with me.
Yeah.
And particularly the character of Kevin Flynn, this guy who was making video games. That was something that I wanted to do at some point in my life, was make video games. And he lived in his own arcade, in an apartment above his own arcade. And
well, that's the dream right there.
Yeah, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And really, when I first came up with the idea of doing an arcade, and if there's anybody watching this that is not familiar with me, so both myself and Azrial here, we're broadcasting from an arcade. And when I originally created this business, it was called the Game Grid Arcade. And I got that directly from Tron. And there's actually I guess he would be a competitor to us here in Utah, where he calls his place Flynn's Retrocade. And so there's that. And so, yeah, I have been heavily influenced by Tron, but why haven't I ever gotten the arcade game? Well, when I opened this up in 2008 already, it wasn't something that was very easy to come across already. Tron and Discs of Tron have always been highly prized collector's items within the arcade collector market, and most of the time their prices are outrageous. They don't make any sense for going into a business. They make sense for a collector, but not for a business. And I think the cheapest Tron I've ever seen was maybe $800. But otherwise, it's when Tron Legacy came out, I think it was somewhere around, shot up to like $2,000, which was a bit ridiculous. And as I did a video recently about retro arcade games and how much money they don't make, unfortunately, I don't think Tron these days would really earn very well. Now, I did try to get a Tron Legacy pinball machine back when that came out. I think it was 2011.
Which is awesome, by the way.
Yes, it's a great machine, and I really did try to get my hands on one, but because I was still a relatively new business, my distributor, they considered doing a finance deal on pinball machines to be too risky, because pinballs don't really make a lot of money, and so they turned me down. Now, later on, I was able to get a deal from the same distributor, but Tron had already gone out of production, and ever since then, I've just been kind of hoping that maybe there's always been rumors that Stern would do a Vault edition of Tron. Now would have been a great time, given that it's the 40th anniversary of the film, but they haven't yet. So if they do one, then yeah, I may very well finally get my hands on a Tron Legacy pinball machine. Of course, what I would really like to get is the first edition, which had the lenticular display. Let me see if this really works. You can kind of see it here, how
you can kind of make that out.
And so, of course, when Tron Legacy came out, it was trying to ride off of Avatar's coattails, because Avatar brought 3D back to cinemas and everybody wanted to do 3D and everything. And I did actually see Tron Legacy in the theaters 3 times. And I think each time I think I saw it once in 3D and twice in 2D. I can't remember for sure. But yeah, so maybe one day if I came across a reasonably priced Tron. But there's one other issue with both Tron and Discs of Tron, is they are notorious for breaking down. And it already sucks when you get any game in an arcade where it's supposed to be making money, getting played, and then it breaks down. And it's something that has a reputation for it. It usually means that it's going to be down a lot. And that just kind of makes it not really worth having around, which sucks. But it's just the reality of something that's 40 years old at this point. But, you know, if there was ever a remake of something that was running on newer hardware, maybe. And that is a weird trivia fact, is that the original Tron movie, it bombed in theaters, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
it actually almost brought Disney down
Wasn't it
because
that the game actually made more than the
Yep,
movie or
that's what I
something
was
like that?
gonna say. Is that the game itself made more money than the movie did, and Disney even re-released Tron in February 1983 because I think because of how much it was getting played in arcades, they're like, hey, this may be doing well. It's almost like Morbius. What happened with Morbius? Although that was even more hilarious just because that was a meme that made them think, oh man, people
Yeah, I was
really
gonna
love
say I
this
think
movie.
Morbius is powered by memes.
Yeah, that was a total troll. So with Disney, it actually made sense to try again because they saw all these people going out to arcades and just shoving 8 million quarters a week into the Tron machines. And so they're like, well, maybe they'll want to go and see this movie again. And so they actually did re-release it, but it bombed even worse with the re-release, which is sad. But why is it? Why do you think that the original movie did so poorly? It is Morbid time, Blake.
Well, I mean, I think the reason why Tron didn't do well in the theaters had a lot to do with. Honestly, I think people didn't understand the subject matter. Like it was too soon for that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like people didn't even know what a program was. Like they didn't really understand any of that. I think that the subject of the movie might have possibly required you to have a little bit of knowledge to understand what they were talking about. I mean, back in like what 1982, people didn't just have computers in their home. Like that was kind of a really expensive commodity. So
Yeah. If people had something in their house that was a computational device, it was a calculator, or
yeah,
maybe something like the Atari 2600 console, or maybe a PC. And Atari had PCs, Radio Shack had PCs. In 1982, the best-selling PC was a Commodore 64, and I think that
yeah.
was one of the first really heavy-selling computers. But yeah, it was kind of amazing that Tron came out when it did, and it was kind of high level in that regard, where
Yeah, because
it's
I can imagine there's
presenting
people
this.
at the theater watching it just thinking, what are they talking about?
Yeah, and now of course, if you really look at the movie, and if you really look at it and break it down, it's kind of a basic hero sort of movie. It's nothing that's difficult to really understand, but it is weird. And for one thing, there's never ever going to be a movie like this ever again. And that's one of the things. I rewatched it last night in HD. And every time I've watched it, one of the things I love about it is when Kevin Flynn gets digitized into the computer world and everything changes, you really feel like you're in a different world. Like just your mentality, I suppose, it immerses you in a way that's unique. And I think that's something that fantasy and sci-fi films really need to aim for, is trying to make you feel like you're really in this unique world. And obviously you have to turn your brain off a little bit to fully get that. And now, is it true that computers have people inside of them and that programs are thinking and that they're racing light cycles and driving tanks? Probably not. But it was still it was such a creative vision and an imaginative vision. It was really unique in how it presented the material. And then the basic synopsis is also kind of interesting too. I guess one thing that's kind of threw people off is that the movie does have two protagonists, and that's a little strange. And is usually you only have one protagonist, and then you have a villain, and of course you have supporting characters. But the movie's called Tron, but it's really following Kevin Flynn, who's not Tron. And Kevin Flynn's the catalyst for getting things really moving, because he's the one that's hacking into the computer to try and get evidence that this guy Dillinger at Encom stole his video games that he was developing at Encom, Dillinger presented those games as his own, and then became super promoted. And then Kevin Flynn gets fired, and so he's trying to break into the system and get that evidence so that he can be vindicated and also take out Dillinger. And in the course of this, you eventually run into the Tron guy. But Tron is a hero, but also Kevin Flynn is a hero of a sort. And I believe that a lot of the marketing for Tron originally was trying to compare it to Star Wars. And you can kind of see certain elements of Star Wars that they integrated into it. So in a way, Tron is almost like Luke Skywalker, and Flynn is almost like Han Solo, because
so kind of like how maybe like the identity disc is like their lightsaber.
Right. And one is blue, the good guys are blue, the bad guys are red, just like in Star Wars. And then Princess Leia character would be Cindy Morgan's character Yori. In the digital world, I can't remember her name in the real world. I just remember Yori from that. But and then you have kind of the Emperor and his lackey sort of thing going on. Like the MCP is like Emperor Palpatine, and Sark is Darth Vader. Do you want to play pinball? Yeah. Okay. Do you have tokens? Oh, yeah. Go ahead and talk Tron.
Okay. So as Adam was saying, it does have some parallels to Star Wars. I think that honestly, I mean, if I had to pick between the two, I'd pick Tron, just because I'm a complete obsessive over Tron. But oh yeah, and I didn't get to say at the end there was so after I got that movie at the video shop, I played it so many more times, I actually wore it out to the point where it almost wasn't watchable anymore. So I was I just destroyed that tape by playing it so many times.
Yeah. And Bush and Ryu Cat does mention something interesting in the chat, which I did look this up too, because I was wondering, what came out around the same time as Tron that could have possibly hurt it. And funny enough, Tron was the only movie released it that week, so it didn't have any competition. Like these days, there's always so many movies released that there's usually some competition where studios will try and plan things out so that they're not having a movie stomped on by something else that might be more popular. But back in the early 80s, it wasn't always like that. I mean, yeah, you did have multiple movies launching sometimes, but not always. But the thing that Tron had to compete with was E.T., and E.T. was huge. Right? If you did not grow up in the 80s, or if you weren't around in the 80s, it's just one of those things that you kind of had to be there for.
Oh, definitely.
It was a phenomenon. And E.T. was in movie theaters. I looked this up. The average was 20 weeks in theaters, which these days that's unheard of. Usually movies, especially post-pandemic, are only in theaters for maybe, 45, 90 days tops, and then
something like that,
out. But E.T. made so much money. It came out a month before Tron, but that was the thing, is people wanted to go see it over and over and over again, where they just didn't really pay attention to anything else. And E.T. was a much more, I guess, relatable movie. Overall, it didn't have weird computer terminology, and it didn't have this strange look to it, and everything. And so if E.T. hadn't come out when it came out, maybe Tron would have done better, or if Tron had came out sooner. Blade Runner also came out, I think, just a couple of weeks prior to Tron.
Well, I gotta be honest, that is a good movie.
It is, although I don't think it performed like in any huge, massive way. It wasn't necessarily a massive blockbuster, but in looking at the 1982 film earnings, there was some strange movie that I've never even heard of that did make pretty good money there. And I can't remember what it was called. It was some sort of cop movie. And so, it's hard to say what all that might have been, and or how things might have turned out had, I guess, it been, maybe if it had come later in the 80s, something like that. But, what's interesting about it, especially every time I've watched it or rewatching it yesterday, is it's a little bit more philosophical than you would think, or if you've only just heard about Tron, about, oh, it's a hacker who goes into a computer. But they actually have a lot of themes in there that, like, Star Wars didn't really touch. Like Star Wars I remember in New Hope, Darth Vader and one of those lackey general captain guys on the Death Star are talking about the Force, and the captain guy who gets choked after he says this, that hokey religion of yours didn't help you find the stolen plans and whatever. But in Tron, they're talking about users, human beings who are using computers as gods all the time. And there's this religion inside the computer where all the programs are worshiping users essentially as gods. And that's kind of a high level concept for
Sark
a Disney
says,
movie.
if you believe in the users, then you're going to get the standard, substandard training and eventual elimination.
Yep, exactly. Yep. But it's funny because when Sark's earlier talking to the MCP, he says, users wrote us. A user even wrote you. So he believes in the users.
No one user wrote me.
Yep, but he's pushing this thing. And maybe there's also some themes of the US versus the Soviet Union there. I mean, there is a brief mention of that, kind of the Cold War
Kremlin
era. Yeah, as the MCP is going to hit the Pentagon and the Kremlin. It essentially would have been the first cyber terrorist attack that took place. But it's also talking about how programs think, and that it's essentially like AI. And so that's it's interesting that it has these themes in this otherwise adventure hacker movie and video game movie. It's also, I think, the real first video game movie as well. It's not the first movie to show video games, as arcade machines had popped up earlier. I think the very first movie to ever show an arcade game would have been Soylent Green, as there's a computer space in there. And then there was other movies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There was I think like Dawn of the Dead or something had an arcade scene in it or something like that.
Yeah. And there was also, I think it's called Midnight Madness, where Michael J. Fox, I think it was one of his first movies, if not his first, where he's playing Starfighter by Exidy in there. But, with Tron, arcades really are essential. And that's one reason why on this channel about arcades that I'm talking about a movie here, is obviously not a movie review thing or channel, is that it's so heavily influenced by arcades. In fact, Steven Leisberger, I hope I said that right, his inspiration for Tron came from his Pong addiction. He said in 1976 he was addicted to playing Pong, and he probably played stuff like Breakout. And when you look at the games that they play in the movie, they are all directly influenced from arcade games. So the Light Cycles, well, there was never an arcade game called Light Cycle or Snake. There was what was one of them called? There was Bigfoot Bonkers. There was a few that came out in 1977 pre-Space Invaders, where you did have the player-controlled line on the screen, and you would draw this line, and you had to try and get the other computer player or human player to run into that line, and that's where Light Cycles comes from. And they just put a clever idea on top of that of what if these were motorcycles inside of the machine, whereas in the real world they're seeing just bright lines on the screen. Or you have the final MCP battle, spoilers, it's obviously influenced by Breakout, where he has these shields that he has to hit to take it out and
Yep.
whatnot. You have the tanks, where Tank was a huge hit in the 1970s. It was a game that really saved Atari, as it was their biggest hit after Pong. And that,
So like
I'm trying to think if there's
combat.
yeah, Combat is what most people know that as, because it was a packing game for the Atari 2600. But in arcades, the game was called Tank, and you had Tank 8, which was an 8-player version of Tank. You had Ultra Tank. I think you might have had, I can't remember if there was another one. I think Tank 2 as well. And so, yeah, Kicks. Yeah, I would also agree. Kicks is like the light cycle games, just taken in a different direction. And Kicks is one of my favorites. It was actually released in 1982 as well.
Yeah, I like that game as well.
Yeah, that was an awesome game. Kind of surprised that Taito hasn't done something more recent with that.
Of course, I guess you got to realize I'm kind of Taito biased, so.
Sure. But yeah, just there's so much influence from arcades, and then Space Paranoids was obviously influenced by Battlezone. And I believe Tron is actually the only movie I've ever watched the director's commentary for, and it's super fascinating. If you are interested in filmmaking and how they do things, I mean, what went into the making of Tron is absolutely incredible and insane. Just how much work was done for that. But
an immense amount of work, yeah,
and we can get into that in a second. But one of the things that was that they had several arcade machines from Atari there, and Jeff Bridges was really good at Battlezone, and they said that they often had to pull Jeff off, and he didn't really want to go and do his scenes because he wanted to keep playing Battlezone. And funny enough, the game he's playing in the movie is Space Paranoids, which is essentially Battlezone, just with filled 3D polygons. But one thing that I should note is on IMDb, where it has a bunch of trivia about Tron, it does have an incorrect thing there where it says that Space Paranoids was a 3D game that came out like a decade before the first 3D games. And that's not true. Atari actually did release in 1983 iRobot, which was the first 3D polygon
I've played
game.
That,
yeah, it's also kind of a weird, bizarre game too. But funny enough, it doesn't look too far off of where Tron was.
Well, no, because I remember when I saw Tron and I was watching, so Kevin Flynn's sitting there in the arcade and he's playing Space Paranoids. And I was looking at that thinking, oh, that game's got amazing graphics. Where's that game?
Oh, yeah.
I want to play that
When
game.
is that coming out?
When's that coming out?
Yeah. And Bushin, to answer your question, he's a big Taito fan, right, Azriel?
Yeah, my favorite game series of all time is Darius.
Yeah. So you can thank Brian here for convincing me to get a Darius Burst, another Chronicle machine. And in a way, you're kind of the one that helped me convince Taito to bring that to the States. So
we had a big push on that to try to get it over here, and we were successful, and it's been pretty great, man. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, getting back to the movie, I mean, it's not a perfect movie, and it may be a little hard for some people to watch at this time. But what went into it? Well, or I guess one misconception about it is that it's super heavy on CG, and it's actually not. I think there's only maybe a total of 15 minutes of computer-generated imagery in the whole film, but a vast majority of it is animation and rotoscoping.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, so like,
but I think they did such a good job that you really couldn't even tell.
Right. They blend it seamlessly, and funny enough, or sad enough, there were some Disney animators who refused to work on the film because they were worried that computers were going to replace them, which kind of did later on. But
that's still a common worry in this day and age as well.
Sure. And so that was an issue, but it does mention in the commentary that the guy who played Ram, I think his name is Dan Shore. Dan Shore, sorry. He was walking down the street one day, and he had a guy come up to him at random and say, "I hate your nose." He's like, "Excuse me?" And
What?
it's like, "I hate your nose. I've been painting your nose for however many months every single day," because he had to go in and paint certain things and,
Oh, it was
and
one of
stuff.
the animators. Okay.
Yeah, one of the animators, and
That's funny.
it was just a weird interaction that he had. But I mean, you look at the movie and you can tell where there's the animation used, and it really is in a lot of the scenes that they used a ton of matte paintings, or a lot of the scenes within the computer. There's a ton of matte paintings. There's actually a scene where I think it's Flynn, where he's sneaking around the computer trying to get to Tron, where there's picture, it almost looks like overhead photos of a city, and it actually was Dresden, Germany. It was aerial reconnaissance photographs that they used from World War II, and just kind of integrated into the wall and changed the color.
Which scene is it?
I think it's when it's around the IO Tower scene. I believe it's somewhere close to that, kind of in the middle of the movie. But he's you'll see this part where if you look closely, it's like, this is a city that they use. And it was Dresden, Germany. But they just
I didn't know that. That's
interesting.
interesting.
They did a lot of cool things to create this entirely unique look. And I also, when I watched it last night, I watched it with my newer sound system with the subwoofer, and wow, that they put a lot of work into the audio as well, the sound effects and things like that. Of course, Wendy Carlos did the soundtrack. She actually did a lot of work with Stanley Kubrick, but
I want to do a shout out for Wendy Carlos, because I think that she doesn't get enough credit for that soundtrack. Which I think is it's quintessential Tron. When you hear it, like, it's definitely...
Oh, sure. There's nothing else that comes to mind, at least for me, but maybe I'm biased.
It's really atmospheric, and definitely has the sound of being full of adventure and stuff like that. And yet it somehow manages to keep that electronic sound to it.
Yeah. If you're into synth music, synth wave, I know right now there seems to be a lot of interest out there for synth wave music.
Synth wave is a big thing.
Yeah, and some certain subgenres, retro wave and things like that. I mean, Wendy Carlos probably would be a pioneer in that regard. Now, of course, the technical aspects of the film is probably what gets the most attention, whereas then the story is a little like, eh. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe that's just because they were tinkering with some high-level concepts. There's also a weird love triangle thing that goes on too, which is kind of interesting. But they did set that up because, looks like we lost Brian. And so let me see about getting him back here. Not sure what might have happened there. Just reuse the link. But I'll keep talking while I wait for him to get back. Okay, there we go.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
No, that's all right. Yeah, definitely check out the soundtrack. Now, of course, Tron Legacy as well. I really appreciate that the soundtrack of that was done by Daft Punk, and what they did with that was amazing. It's a real shame that they didn't get an Academy Award for that soundtrack. I think it went to, was it Inception or Hans Zimmer? I mean, he's a great he's a great musician as well. But I think Tron Legacy definitely should have gotten an Academy Award for that. And
yeah, whenever anybody talks about Tron Legacy, they're always talking about like how amazing that soundtrack was. I mean, it's really I love that soundtrack.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I actually was at I think it was Target recently, and I was just kind of wandering around looking for something else, but I came across an aisle where they have vinyl discs, and there was a Tron Legacy one there right up front, and I almost bought it. I don't have a turntable to be playing vinyl discs, but I was almost tempted just for the Tron soundtrack to have it on vinyl, to buy a vinyl record player and get that soundtrack. So maybe I'll do that.
Yeah,
one
there's
of these
another
days.
thing that's come back into style again.
Yeah, definitely. And in the 80s, I remember my parents had a vinyl record player. It was a massive piece of furniture. It wasn't a tiny thing, but yeah, it was. Hey, how's it going? So yeah, with I guess getting back to Tron and thinking some of the maybe negative things about it. I had thought of more, but now my mind's kind of going blank. I guess the love triangle thing's kind of weird, just because, I mean, again, they do set it up where the, again, I can't remember her name in the real world, Yori. In the real world, she used to date Kevin Flynn, and now she's with Alan Bradley. But she still seems to have feelings for him. And in the computer world, Laura, that's right. Thank you. But that seems to be that's an interesting concept in the movie too. Is how programs that are created by users have certain qualities from their creators in them, and that seems to be something that they applied. Where she may be kind of still torn between her ex and her current guy, because at the end of the movie, she makes out with Kevin Flynn right before he jumps into the MCP, and then within 5 minutes, she's making out with Tron, almost like nothing. And it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think, are there any other negative things about the movie that maybe turn people off to it, or make it like, this isn't a 10 or even a 9, maybe an 8 or a 6 or something like that?
I mean, maybe like, admittingly, there are some slow spots in it that can get a little bit boring at times, but especially if you're really interested in the video aspect of it and being in the computer world. So anytime they shift back to the real world, maybe that gets a little boring sometimes, depending on how you feel about that.
Yeah, although that doesn't happen. That's more just at the beginning of the movie. As soon as Kevin's in the computer, you're in the computer world up until the last scene, practically. And so I don't know if that's too jarring, but I guess one thing that I noticed too yesterday is that at the very beginning, when Flynn is hacking into the computer and he's using his program Clue, and he's obviously the same actor playing Clue, he's trying to act very unemotional, very robotic of a way. His voice almost sounds like a robot. Do you think we can merge with this memory bit? But as soon as the recognizers chase him, he becomes very human, very emotional. He's screaming, and
there's too many of them.
Yeah. Get out of here! And from then, and like even Yori does this too, where when you first meet Yori and she's at the Solar Sailor place, she's also very robotic, kind of just an automaton.
Yeah, right. 30, 56, 99 are correct.
Yeah.
7, 4, and 8 are missing.
Yeah. But then when Tron kind of shakes her head, Yori, it's me. And it's like, oh, Tron, and then she's basically like a human from there. And so maybe that's a little bit jarring.
They haven't built a circuit that could hold you.
Right. And so maybe there could have been, I guess you probably wouldn't want everybody in the world acting very robotic without any life. Maybe that's why they did that. And of course it could be kind of hard. But then again, like in Star Trek, you have people like Leonard Nimoy play an alien who is not supposed to have any emotions. Maybe if they tried to play them more like Vulcans.
Right. Which makes sense. But with a program, I mean, there's no one saying that a program has to not have an emotion or talk like a robot. So,
sure. Yeah. But then again, these would have been programs that maybe were 4 kilobytes in size, if that. So probably not a lot of code there available for operating emotions and whatnot. But it's fine. But that is something that.
Sorry, we're 10 kilobytes short of a personality.
Sure. But you could that also could have been played with though, where Kevin Flynn's like the only one with a personality in a world of these soulless, lifeless sort of things. But that also doesn't seem to match. Like the theme that they obviously wanted to go for was that programs are like people. They're like their creators, and they have their personality traits, things like that. And so, to me, it's fine. It's a forgivable thing, but I could see where somebody who's not into Tron watching it for the first time may find that a little strange as well. Because, of course, we still today don't have an AI that's like the MCP and is able to talk like that or emote like that, too. But
yeah, well, some programs will be thinking soon.
yeah, which 40 years ago, of course, there is that guy from Google who's claiming that a chat bot right now is thinking. But at least from what I read of the things that it said, it's like, I don't. This doesn't seem like it's thinking to me. It sounds just kind of like a slightly more advanced chat bots than what the ones that I normally come across. Now, I guess you guys want to talk maybe a little bit about Tron Legacy. Although before we get there, I want to put a shout out to Tron 2.0, the video game that was released in 2002, I want to say. And I guess when Tron Legacy was announced as it was really happening, I was excited, but a big part of me was hoping that they were just going to make Tron 2.0 into a movie because I thought that game was fantastic. I loved the story. I think a condensed version of that would have been a perfect story to tell.
I think I played through that game like 3 times from start to finish.
Yeah. I got it on PC. I had it on the original Xbox.
But I had it on.
I remember playing it with my friends. Of course, they usually wanted to play Halo and not Disc Arena or Light Cycles, but it had some cool.
I was all about that single player campaign.
Yeah, I played the single player more than I ever played the multiplayer modes, but the Light Cycle arenas was pretty cool. But overall, I thought that was a really fantastic way to have rebooted Tron. As if you've never played that game, you are Jet Bradley, who's Alan Bradley's son. Alan Bradley's still working at Encom, and there's a Tron machine in the break room or something, and I can't remember exactly because it's been a few years since I played Tron 2.0.
Oh, and Laura's passed away.
Right.
And she's now some sort of AI thing called Mithria.
Mm-hmm. And it actually was the actress Cindy Morgan who did the voice for that. And that was a nice touch because that was one sad thing about Tron Legacy is for some reason they didn't have her appear in it. They did have Cindy Morgan and Bruce Boxleitner appear.
She was in the
marketing event, and they even kissed.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
Like they were acting like they were married still. But she wasn't in the movie at all, and it's like, oh, that sucks.
I don't think they even bring up her name in the movie.
Not that I recall.
I don't recall in Tron Legacy that they even say anything about her.
No, they don't. Because they do mention Kevin Flynn. Oh, they don't really mention. Oh gosh, what's the name? Sam Flynn. They don't mention his mother pretty much at all. And then Alan Bradley obviously became kind of a surrogate father of a sort that helped raise him after Kevin Flynn disappeared. But they just don't really mention Alan's wife, who I believe it's pretty much implied at the end of the original Tron when Alan and Laura are on the rooftop that they are married at that point because you can see a wedding ring on her finger, but that might have just been the actress. I don't know. But
man, that's a detail.
Yeah, it was just something. This is why I rewatched the movie last night, is so that I could pick up on worthless trivia things and to show how big of a Tron nerd I was growing up. I think in 7th grade, I was able to convince my math teacher, who also liked Tron, at the very end of the year to let us watch Tron in class. And he said, yeah, this is fine because it has something to do with math, computers, whatever.
Family friendly and stuff,
Yeah.
you know.
And I was able to submit some trivia questions for that, and they were absurdly nerdy, but I can't remember what they were about. But anyways, yeah, they're with Tron 2.0, fantastic game, and just a real shame that I guess it never really got finished. I think fans had to patch it up to correct some of the bugs that were in it. But Bush and Ryu
I do want to mention what's in the chat here about Tron Evolution.
Yeah. I haven't actually played that one, so if you have, go ahead, talk about it.
Now, Tron Evolution's great because, especially because I believe that one came out just short of when the movie was going to be released, and it actually does tie in to the movie in a small way, not a huge way, but it does connect into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really cool because I played that game, and then I went and I saw the movie, and so all the things clicked together, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that, you know.
Yeah.
That's a really cool game. Plays a lot like the 3D Prince of Persia games.
Okay.
Just in Tron world, and
that was on the Wii as well, wasn't it? Or was it just PS3 and 360?
I played it on the 360 when I played it. I'm not 100% sure.
Gotcha. Now, to throw something out there that not a lot of people know is there was a Tron Legacy arcade game, a video arcade game in development, or at least proposed. So Specular Interactive, who created H2 Overdrive, Dirty Drivin', and Batman, they came up with a full-blown proposal for a light cycle racing game that they submitted to Raw Thrills. But I guess because the movie Legacy didn't perform as well as the hype was leading to, they ended up not going through with it. But there is a Tron light cycle, essentially, in Superbikes 2 that you can pick and drive, and also has a Tron-looking character skin that I think you can also get. But it's too bad. I'd love to get materials on that to share, and so that preserve that. I don't know how far along it got.
So I think having a new Tron arcade game right now would be pretty cool.
It would be, because there is supposedly a Tron 3 in development. Now, the guy who wrote and directed Legacy did have a full, I think he had a script, or at least he had a synopsis or something on what sequel he was going to do. And as I recall, there were some marketing videos that were done like the day after when Sam returns, and there's something where he's in an elevator and he opens up his shirt and it says Flynn lives.
Yeah.
But there was also some little video where Bruce Boxleitner and Dan Shore got together and they were talking too. And there was also that very heavy implication that Dillinger was in the system, that he had been digitized or something like that. I can't remember because it's been 10 years or more, or 12 years now.
Yeah, I do recall in Tron Legacy they had Dillinger's son.
Yeah, they did. But there was an after release video where he was talking with his father, and his father had an MCP like voice, and so that was again implying that he might have been digitized and he was doing a new MCP. But recently, the guy who did Legacy, he's the one who directed Top Gun Maverick, and somebody did ask him about Tron 3. It's like, what happened to this?
Joseph Kosinski.
Yeah. And he said, yeah, I did actually have a story ready to go. What he wanted to do was deal with computer programs entering the real world and what it would be like in the real world there, which could be interesting. But I guess at the same time, I guess I'm just more interested myself in the Tron computer world, just because that's so unique.
Yeah, and I think if you do too much of the real world stuff, it's gonna. Yeah, I don't know if that would work super well.
But of course, either way, the reason why we never got or Legacy never got a sequel, and it could be another. Who knows how many more years it's going to take to get the sequel on this.
Well, they're trying to get something secured. They want to have Jared Leto play a character.
Yeah, he's supposed to be doing that, and so we'll see how that goes, and if they'll be able to who they'll be able to tie in. It's just if they're going to do it, they need to do it soon because the original actors for it, like Jeff Bridges and Bruce Boxleitner, they're still around, fortunately, but they're not getting younger. And I may be wrong about this, but I thought that Bridges might have had cancer some time ago.
He did, but I think he
I think he
survived
beat
that.
it. Yeah,
No.
but still, you want to take advantage of those guys while you still can. I haven't seen the actor who played Sam Flynn. I think it's Garrett Hedlund.
Garrett Hedlund, yeah.
In much at all.
No, in fact, before that, before Tron Legacy, I'd never even heard of the guy.
Yeah, I hadn't either. And I know he did a few films after that, but then
I think he was in like Friday Night Lights or something.
I think I heard that. I never saw that movie. I know he's in some
Didn't
pirate movie or a Peter Pan thing. I can't remember.
Yeah, I didn't see that either.
Looked it up. But
I'm not. The guy seems like a good actor though. Like he played his part well as Sam. I like it.
Yeah. I thought he was pretty good as Sam and very believable as somebody who become a bit of a rebel and finding his father again unexpectedly in the computer, thought his father was just dead. He's either chilling in Costa Rica, dead, or both.
Yeah.
Whatever that line was. But what were your general thoughts on Tron Legacy?
I liked it. When I saw it the very first time, I made sure I went to IMAX 3D, the whole thing. The thing that was really nice about that was they kept the whole thing in 2D until he goes into the computer world. Then it immediately switches to 3D, and I thought that was amazing. That's a really cool idea.
Yeah, and that, as I recall, what Joseph Kosinski had said is he wanted to do something like the Wizard of Oz, whereas in the Wizard of Oz, it's black and white until she gets into the Oz world, and that's when it goes to full-blown vibrant color. And so that
was very really similar to that.
Yeah, that was a very nice touch. I mean, granted, 3D overall is kind of a gimmick, but that was a clever way, I think, that they were able to use that, as it did help you feel a little bit more like you are in this different world. I mean, with Legacy, I do remember feeling a slight tinge of disappointment, one, because it wasn't Tron 2.0, but also just the design for me was a little bit, I guess, too dark. I mean, one nice thing about the original film was how much contrast there was. Yeah, it was dark, but you had a lot of these different popping colors that would show up and different colored programs and things that you could identify the tank guys because they're all green, and you know who the bad guys and the good guys were, but then you also had those nondescript programs, data pushers and whatnot, but it just created this unique look, whereas Legacy, it felt a little more sterile, where it's just, I guess, a little not as diverse in that idea of the look, but it still looks cool. I
really liked the scene with Caster in the bar, the end of line bar, and you see all these different programs talking and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of cool. So you got like this bar aspect, but they're all programs and they're drinking these like really fluorescent drinks and it's crazy stuff.
And something like the power source that's in the original movie when they go to the cave and they come across the power source, and it was that was also kind of a nod where in Clue in the original movie, when you first meet him and he's driving the tank, he has a cup there and the water is glowing, and when he drinks it, which is
I forgot about that. That's right.
Yeah, because he even spills a little bit, but they animated the spill so that it glows, and so it's like they carry power around, but I don't think the video games have really ever done much with that I recall. So yeah, that I guess
I think maybe we could talk just briefly about Tron Legacy's attempts at trying to do the de-aging effect.
Sure. I think it might have been the first movie to really do that.
It was in its
So,
infancy, and you can see it just in the way that the eyes and the mouths move. And
sure.
there's a scene in particular when, towards the beginning of Tron Legacy, when Sam's with his dad,
Hmm.
and his dad turns around at the front door and says,
We're always on the same team.
"They're always on the same team." That looked so weird.
It did. Yeah, the uncanny valley sort of effect.
Super uncanny valley.
Now, granted, for 2011, it was, I think, the best that they were able to do. But what's, I guess, kind of sad is $5.
No, seriously, go back and like watch that part. It looks really weird. Especially if you get to the parts where you got Clue and the computer talking, and man, his face is just like,
Yeah, yeah.
it looks really weird. Yeah.
I guess what's kind of sad is, there was a lot made about Luke Skywalker, the de-aged Luke Skywalker in The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And I've seen videos where some special effects artists have gone in and fixed that and made it look a lot better and shown that, yeah, they could have done better than what they did. But what Disney did looks more like what they were doing in Tron 11 years ago than what they really are capable of now. But I guess maybe one day, if Joseph Kosinski wants to do a director's cut and uses newer tech and is able to do some more realistic de-aging.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've probably seen a lot of the deep fake stuff that's been coming out. I mean, that's great technology. That looks crazy.
It is, yeah. I've seen some stuff, a lot with Tom Cruise, where it's just like, holy cow!
It looks just like him. Yeah,
it looks like
he's there.
No, I think they did try to do what they could. Like with Flynn, there, that scene you mentioned, he is. It's kind of dark. They're trying not to put too much camera time on him and too much light on him. Now, granted, that kind of gets thrown out the window when it shows Clue, and Clue has that same sort of face.
It's this really weird, stretchy looking face.
Yeah, and so you're like, wow, that's interesting Botox.
They tried. You could tell they were really trying, and with it in its infancy like that, you have to kind of give it a pass.
I do. Yeah, I didn't really have a problem with that at the time, and I did like how they did it with Bruce Boxleitner when they showed him as Tron in the
that looked all right.
Anything. Yeah, it did. And part of what they did, you'll notice, is they put kind of a filter over it because it was talking about a memory, and they make it almost like not quite pixelated, but almost like there's this, almost like a VR screen type filter over the top of it. And I think that helped. It's just that I think, as I recall, other fans saying, and for myself, one big disappointment about Legacy is just how little Tron was actually in the movie. And that, it was Rinsler for most of it, but even then Rinsler never says anything up until he has his come to Jesus mode, or come to Flynn moment, I guess you could say. And 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 then even when he gets knocked off of his jet and turns back to blue, it's just, there's no face.
He just kind of sinks into the sea of simulation, and I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah, I think they were setting it up that he would be coming back, but it just felt like, if your movie's named Tron, it has to have a bit more Tron in it than what they showed. And I guess also I was hoping that when they showed the battle scene, that he wouldn't have been in a black suit, but like his original bluish white suit too. But whatever, that's no biggie. But his hair looked great, at least in that de-aged scene. And I think Bruce Boxleitner himself said he liked how he looked. He's like, oh wow, I look great. But yeah, that's just one of those things that it's a tech thing, and so maybe with Tron 3 they'll be able to do a much better de-aging job if they need to. It's just whatever happens with Tron 3, I really hope that there's more Tron in it than Legacy had. That would probably be my biggest gripe with Legacy overall. And granted, Legacy, if you were kind of on the fence on it, if you saw it back in the day, it does get better with time, and I've enjoyed it coming back to it. But yeah, and in the chat, if I know Kingdom Hearts games was Rox's suit design based off of Rinsler. I've not really played Kingdom Hearts, so I can't say. I do know that there are Tron stuff in there. Have you played much Kingdom Hearts?
That's kind of not in my genre that I play.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I'll say yes to your question. I don't know for sure, but yeah, I'll say probably. I mean, if it's kind of because Rinsler's suit didn't have a lot of light on it, a lot of the neon stuff, and of course it has the T in there, but otherwise it's mostly just a dark suit. So if this character's suit is mostly dark with just a little bit of orange on it, then probably so. But do you guys in the chat have any questions or comments or thoughts about the Tron franchise? Just let us know. I guess I should pull up IMDb and go through a little bit of the trivia on this. We've talked a little bit about some of it already. And I do remember with Legacy, just the marketing push that they did for that was pretty awesome for a Tron fan to enjoy and go through. Now, granted, where I'm obviously kind of a Tron shill, no, Disney never approached me to do any shilling for Tron back in the day. I did write about it on Arcade Heroes a few times and covered the different marketing things, but it was because the marketing things were using video games. I guess one missed opportunity, speaking of Disney and things like Kingdom Hearts, that I'm surprised that they never did was with Wreck-It Ralph. I don't recall seeing any sort of Tron like Easter eggs or hints in either Wreck-It Ralph movie.
I only saw the first one, and I don't recall any Tron stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, Wreck-It Ralph 2 cranked up the number of references, kind of pop culture references in general. But I think that would have been a good opportunity.
Hey, was there any Tron stuff in Ready Player One?
I've only seen that.
I didn't see that either, so.
I've seen it once.
You would think they'd put something in there for that, though.
It's such a massively reference-heavy movie that there probably is something in there, but there's just so much stuff that they throw at the screen that's reference.
Got to watch it like 20 times to pick everything up.
Yeah, you really do to find everything. And actually, I should say that Tron is one of the first movies that I think I ever paused and rewound to catch something on, particularly the arcade scene, to see what arcade games were in the arcade. And I probably did that on VHS and DVD. Of course, the resolution was so poor that it was really difficult. Now with the HD remaster, it's a lot easier to catch those things. And they had a lot of Atari games, and that's what's kind of amusing to me and strange is, Midway got the Tron license and so they did Tron and Discs of Tron, but the movie itself, it almost doesn't have any Midway games in it. It's all Atari stuff, so it's kind of like, wonder what happened there that Atari didn't grab the license to do the video game. I wonder why that happened, and maybe it's because it was about that time. I think it was July of 1982 where the boss of Warner was trying to work out the deal to get ET, to get ET for the video game side, and so maybe it's just, Tron looks like it's failing, so we're not going to throw our money at that. We want to get ET. Yeah. And I do have a video on my channel about the ET arcade game, in case you missed that, which I did for the ET 40th anniversary celebration, since that was last month. But yeah, I guess just over the years it's been kind of sad how Tron gets thrown to the side of things that Disney can do now. And this is, of course, why
you keep reading about it online, but then you don't ever see anything, really, any concrete evidence of something happening.
I guess I get off on tangents too easily here, so my apologies on that. But I think what I meant to say was that when Mr. Kaczynski was being interviewed about Top Gun Maverick recently and saying how he did have a synopsis at least, or a plan for Tron 3. The reason why it got canceled is because of Star Wars and Marvel, because Disney obviously picked up both of those properties not long after Tron Legacy came out. And so that pretty much killed it, because Disney just wants to crank out tons and tons and tons and tons of those products and milk it until nobody's buying them anymore. Which in some cases it looks like we're starting to get there, given how certain things are doing. But it's sad that Tron gets the shaft there. And I also know Mr. Kaczynski was supposed to also do a reboot for the Black Hole, as Tron was the second live action movie that Disney had done. Black Hole was first. And growing up as a kid, I watched anything with space stuff in it.
If you watch the sequence in Tron Legacy,
there's the comic there.
There's a black hole reference in there,
right at the beginning there. And that was because he was developing, it was in pre-production at least, some sort of reboot or something for Black Hole, just because that was another movie that had some uneven stuff in it. And of course the science makes no sense, like people breathing in space.
I honestly have to see
anyways.
I missed it.
You never saw Black Hole?
I never saw it.
Oh, gotcha. That was another one of those where I think I recorded it on Disney Channel and then rewatched it on VHS a bunch of times. And like I said, back in the 80s, in addition to video games, I love space stuff, sci-fi. So I love watching Star Wars and Star Trek The Next Generation. And if it had spaceships in it, I would watch it. And so I watched The Black Hole. And it was a strange movie, because it seems like they wanted to do a horror movie, but because they were Disney, it's like, well, we're Disney, we're family entertainment, we can't do a horror movie. So it's kind of uneven as far as its emotional tone goes. And so you'll have these rousing adventure, swashbuckling parts, and then you have this dreary, depressing, almost horror grade parts in it to spice throughout, and it just kind of doesn't work. But yeah,
I should have been watching Black Hole, and I should have been watching stuff like that. I was too busy watching stuff about like a cat from outer space,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was watching that instead.
But yeah, it was both the failure of Black Hole and Tron that almost brought Disney down. But later on, they got through it, and they created Touchstone Pictures, and that's where they were starting to do that. The Lost in Space rebooted TV show, your Black Hole sequel? I guess it could be. I've only seen, I think, the first 2 episodes of the Lost in Space reboot, so I don't know how that all played out. I do remember seeing the Lost in Space film in theaters, that reboot film that had that one actor from Friends.
That I saw, I saw that one.
Yeah, and I remember seeing that in theaters, and that was interesting, as I recall, but it's been a long time since I've seen it. I remember something about space spiders and Dr. What's-his-face, Smith, I think, becoming some sort of hybrid space creature guy. But yeah, maybe in spirit, I could see that as a Black Hole sort of thing. It's like that. If you're going to reboot Black Hole, it's either full swashbuckling adventure or full on space horror movie. And it's probably better suited for a space horror movie, kind of like Dead Space. And so that's where I would go. Now we have a super chat, and thank you so much, Agostino Baroni. He says, thank you so much for your YouTube channel and everything you do related to arcade and its history. I live in Brazil, and your channel and articles are absolutely amazing. I love the discussions and all the content you share. Thank you so much, Agostinho. I appreciate that. Thank you. And also, I speak Portuguese. I've wondered if I should ever try and do any sort of Portuguese videos and whatnot. I have some old videos. Last time I was in Brazil, which was about 10 years ago, I did visit some arcades there in Brazil, and it'd be 20 reais that he donated, so thank you. That's what they call Brazilian currency, is the real, not the peso. But yeah, thank you very much for watching us and for the content. I'm always open to hearing things about what content you guys want me to make, and if you want us to do more live stream stuff on movies, arcade related movies, there's not a ton of them out there. I've kind of wanted to do like a riff track sort of thing for the movie Joysticks. I just haven't been sure how to really go about that, because that is a rated R movie, not a family friendly one. It has a lot of boobs in it. But it's all about arcades. Of course, there's The Last Starfighter, which that'll be hitting...
don't get me started on that. That's gonna be another 2 hours.
Right. Well, it could be. Of course, that The Last Starfighter, that's been even sadder, because that's never received a sequel or anything. At least Tron, in addition to getting Legacy and the various video games, it also got Tron Uprising, which I really liked that. Have you ever seen Tron Uprising?
You're gonna be shocked when I tell you no.
The horror. Yeah. Yeah. So if any of you out there haven't seen Tron Uprising, the cartoon that they did, which was it was a prequel to Legacy. That one actually does show Tron. It shows Bruce Boxleitner. He voices it. It also had voice talent.
Okay, I was going to ask you if he voiced it.
Yeah, he's in it. He's a major character in it, and so in many ways, Uprising is kind of like, this is more what I wanted out of Tron Legacy than what we got.
What's the matter with me? I gotta see that.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why a lot of people didn't see it, like I didn't see it back when it was on the air, because it was on some weird Disney sub cable channel, Disney XD, and it's just not a channel that a lot of people have access to. Now it is on Disney Plus, so if you have Disney Plus, you can watch it there. I don't know if
I don't have that either
disc or not, but yeah, but it's a fantastic movie. It also has voice acting talent from Elijah Wood and Lance Henriksen. Lance Henriksen is somebody that you would probably know from the Aliens movies.
Yeah, Bishop.
Yep, Bishop. And he voice acts as the villain in that. Now, some of the art direction in Uprising's a little strange, like how they draw the bodies, the proportions is a little strange, but it also hits that vibrancy thing that I was talking about earlier, where, I mean, granted, there is a line in Legacy where he says, you should have seen this place back in the day where it was so much more alive and everything, and they really captured that in Uprising. So I guess that must have been what he was going for in Legacy, is to make this more of a dreary, sort of sterile environment where, it's clues.
And we have $5 from Bushin Rio Cat.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So he says, agreed with that guy. It's also it's a shame the last Starfighter movie never got its due video game piece. Yeah, it is. And so Atari was developing a Last Starfighter arcade game based on what was in the movie. But when they were looking at how much it would have cost to produce, it would have cost over $10,000. Now, up to that point, Atari actually did release a game that was close to $10,000, the TX1.
Are you talking about the racing one? Oh, no.
TX1.
Okay,
TX1 was by Tatsumi Electronics, which was kind of like
that had the 3 screens.
Yeah, had 3 screens, enormous cabinet.
Oh, but,
maybe it's very possible that game is part of the reason why they canned the Last Starfighter, because, well, one reason they canned the Last Starfighter arcade game is because, well, the movie bombed. It didn't do nearly as well as they had hoped. And then 2, the cabinet was going to cost probably around $10,000. And they probably saw from how not well TX1 sold that it's like, yeah, this isn't going to be worth our development costs that we're throwing at it. But there is a video.
That game was great, though.
Yeah,
that was like a pseudo sequel pole position.
It was, but yeah, good luck finding one. But that's one thing with both Tron and Last Starfighter is just, I think they were hyped up a lot and they were compared to other things that had done well. And so, like in the case of Tron, they were comparing it a lot to Star Wars. It's like, this is going to be the new Star Wars. It's a special effects extravaganza. It's an adventure movie, and so people are going to love it. And then, of course, it didn't do well. And then last Starfighter, I don't know if they were comparing it to anything, but yeah, it just didn't.
No, I understand where they were trying to draw those parallels.
Sure.
Yeah,
and
I get it.
That's one reason where I think Legacy failed is, I mean, it did fine. It made over $400 million, which in 2011 wasn't bad, but they kept comparing it to Avatar, and they kept saying, well, we're using the next generation of cameras or the same cameras that they used in Avatar to do the 3D. And so it also has this built-in fan base. So this is going to be the next Avatar. And so when you're placing your goal that high and it's kind of unattainable. It's like if James Cameron had directed.
No slight on
Tron
Avatar.
Legacy.
I think the movie's fine. I like it.
Yeah, I'm just saying when it comes to setting expectations,
I don't see the comparison there though.
Yeah, you shouldn't go for like one of the most highest grossing movies ever just because you're using the same cameras. And so that's unfortunate. And like I said, that was one reason why Raw Thrills passed on the Tron Legacy light cycle racing game was the movie didn't do as well as they had hoped. And it's like, well, it still did fine, but I wish they still would have taken the chance on the project, because it could have ended up like the Tron arcade game from Midway. Like you said at the beginning, that made more money than the movie did. So maybe a light cycle arcade game would make more money than $400 million for arcades.
I can imagine like a VR light cycle game where you're sitting there, you're in the thing, and you're
those actually that exists. Don't like water people. What was I going to say? Yeah, so there are. I saw this at Amusement Expo. If you look up my VR videos, I don't have a ton of them because a lot of people don't seem to watch them. But there are a lot of VR arcade games out there that different companies are trying. A few from China, quite a few from China, some from Europe. But I think there's this European company that has this light cycle looking cabinet that you sit on, almost like the old Super Hang-On. And you put a VR headset on and you play a game. But granted, it's not licensed, so it doesn't look exactly like the Tron Legacy bikes or the original light cycles.
What's the theme park that has the light cycle roller coaster thing?
So
isn't that like Disneyland Shanghai or something?
Yeah, the Shanghai location has that Tron coaster. And I actually know a guy who worked on that, on the Shanghai version.
Oh,
and so
really?
he was working as a Disney Imagineer. And I remember him telling me about it before it launched and said, this is an awesome roller coaster. I'm not saying that just because I worked on it, but because it's actually really awesome.
It does look really cool, really fun.
Well, they are building one right now over at Magic Kingdom in Orlando. And so that same ride.
And that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, why would they want to do any of that if they're not planning something?
Well, I think sometimes it just comes down to, you can only do so much with your Marvel properties and your Star Wars properties. And of course they already have like the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge place, which, I've heard mixed stuff about that one. And the Galactic Star Cruiser has apparently been a major flop as well.
Oh boy, that's another 2-hour topic right there.
Yeah. How do you screw up Star Wars? But
you want to pay $6,000 to LARP for 2 days? Come on, come on.
I could find better. I could buy an arcade machine or half an arcade machine with that.
I went out last night with my little green lightsaber and threw it around in the front yard. That's free.
Right? In all my imagination. But, well, yeah, with Tron, that's one thing. I haven't seen a ton of Tron cosplay. Grant, I tried to find it here. Of course, I have my...
Well, there's the Tron guy.
Yeah, I have the Tron guy video game. And so I was trying to find that before I came here, but I couldn't find it in my mess of Atari 2600 games.
And honestly, I think the Tron guy's outfit's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, he tried to make one like the original, but
Yeah.
there was somebody made a hack of one of the original Tron games that Mattel had released for the Atari 2600 called Tron Man, and you play as Tron Man running around grabbing food to eat. So just kind of poking fun at his
All
way,
right.
but you the coolest thing about that cartridge is that it lights up. It had an LED, a blue LED in it, so when you plug it in, it
Oh,
lights up. It looks
that's
like
kind of
a
cool.
Tron thing. So it's the coolest looking Atari 2600 cartridge that I have. The game itself's kind of dull, but and yeah, there was a couple of Tron games that they did. There was Tron Deadly Discs, and then I think it was just Tron. I can't remember, or Adventures of
Deadly
Tron, something
Discs.
like that
Yeah.
Mattel did for the 2600. But yeah, so yeah, anything else want to talk about Tron? So we've been at this for an hour and a half almost. And so,
Almost. Let's talk about favorite scenes or lines from Tron.
let's see. Well, let's see. Since I saw it last night, um, you go ahead. I'll go. So again, we're both at the arcade here. So I'm in the West Valley location of Arcade Galactic, which used to be called Game Grid Arcade until I had to change the name for legal reasons. And Brian is up at our Ogden location currently. But my very first location, I tried to make it look like a like you were inside the game grid, and so I used fluorescent paints, both red and blue, but I couldn't finish that in time before we had to move, and then I just gave up on that idea. It was a lot of work. But favorite scene from the original Tron, oh, that might be probably the light cycle arena sequence. I would think just that was really well done and pretty intense, kind of short, I suppose. But the legacy light cycle scene was also really cool. Just the way that they made those light trails, the walls look just was really awesome. And I also loved the effects in Legacy as far as when somebody would get derezzed and how they would turn into a bunch of glowing cubes and almost kind of a Minecraft sort of thing there, or a voxel sort of thing there. That always enjoyed that. And so I guess those would probably be my favorite ones. How about yours?
I like well, anything with the light cycles is great,
Sure.
but anything to do with the recognizers.
Yeah, I love the recognize, especially I like the original recognizer design more than the legacy design. The legacy design's still cool. I like what they did with the whole thing of the top sliding down the legs. That was a cool design choice. But
Yeah.
I still have a soft spot in my heart for the originals.
Right. Yeah, I like the blocky aesthetic of the old ones more. I mean, I'm always gonna say I like the old one more, but
Sure. Although, and thinking about it, the disc battle between Sark and Tron at the end is really good, and that moment when Tron's disc breaks Sark's disc and goes through his head, and all of his brains
and all
come
the
out.
sparks come out and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's like
Yeah,
it's kind of gory for a kid's
that's as
movie.
gory as it can get for the computer world, I guess.
Right. But that was so cool what they did. It's just that whole effect of it blowing open.
I heard
and,
that
like,
in that
bolts and
scene
nuts
they had a
coming out.
problem with trying to make it look right when he's stepping over the little breaks in the ground, that they couldn't line it up right, so they'd have him like stepping in the cracks and things, and it was something to do with just how they had to line it up and how he had to move around to make it look like he was standing on that scene where he's fighting Sark. It's one of the behind the scenes things.
Yeah, I imagine that was difficult. And same when Flynn was fighting on the rings with that Crom guy. where
Oh
they had
yeah,
to jump
yeah.
around, and they weren't actually over a pit, but you had to act like you were, and so that was
Right. They
probably
did
a
pretty
lot of
good
fun.
on that one, and he's hanging there, and Master Control's like, finish the game.
Yeah. And as Bush and Cat mentions the whole game part, I remember the first time I think that I watched Tron, and Flynn, when he goes into that recognizer and puts it together using his user power. And he comes up to the grips. He's like, it's just like the old arcade grips. I seriously thought there was an arcade game that must have been based on that line, but there wasn't, and it's too bad. I wonder if anybody ever had any plans to do an arcade
What
game as
game
a
back then
recognizer.
had arcade grips or anything that even had a yoke back then? I'm trying to think of like what
Well,
he would
there
have
were
been
games
talking about.
with yokes, but nothing at all quite as
Nothing that
wide
looked like
or
this,
not.
you know.
Yeah, nothing like that at all. The closest I could think of would be because Atari did create Starship One in 1977, which had a yoke. It wasn't the
Okay,
same
yeah.
design as what they would use with Star Wars and Hydra years later, but it was a yoke controller, same basic principle. And
Wasn't
I
that
came
the
across that
Starship
once.
One game, the one that used like some sort of like rudimentary version of sprite scaling or something like
Yeah,
that in it?
yeah. The sprites basically scale. I don't know if it's technically scaling, but I mean the effect on
Looked
screen
like it.
works. I've actually come across a working Starship One once, and it was pretty amazing. The cabinet was really well done. I loved how they put artwork in front of the monitor, and it's just one of those things that you can only really do with arcades. The yoke controller was really cool, and funny enough, they introduced a starship design in that game that was later used in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, which also was a movie that Tron had to compete with. It was Star Trek II only came out, I think, a month or just weeks before Tron was. So back
Yeah, I imagine
in
that's pretty difficult to do considering Star Trek at that point was already well established.
yeah, and so it was a tough movie season for Tron to compete
Definitely.
there, but yeah, and I used to remember the lines of the original Tron a lot better than I do now. But I used to be able to quote most of the movie, and I know we have quoted a few things here and
My
there.
my absolutely favorite line of the original Tron is right after he wrecks that recognizer in that town of programs, and then he's like, "Whoa!" And then he's like, I'm okay," and then he looks around, and he's like, "Oh, this town's full of live ones."
Right?
I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. And I actually watched the movie with subtitles yesterday, and that was interesting because I caught certain things that I don't think I had caught previously.
Oh, really?
But they have the subtitles for what one of the guys says, and I always wasn't sure what one of the data pusher programs said because he says something like "Here comes something," but he says "Here comes a headache." It's like, okay, that's kind of random.
Comes a headache. Yeah, okay, I remember that.
Yeah, but he says headache there, and that's kind of amusing. And also like the bit. I mean, maybe they didn't really go all the way with bit. Maybe because I don't know if they were trying to go for like a R2D2 sort of thing or not, but um, a bit was still fun little character, at least for kids to see. Granted, that's not how a bit really works. Bits don't have a neutral state. They're either on or they're off. So, oh well, but it's fine. I always like that how those looked as well, and that was one thing I guess I miss in Tron Legacy is no bits around. So, oh well. But Bit was
Oh
a
yeah, I
fun
guess
little
that's true, huh?
character.
There were no bit.
Yeah, I was hoping there would be something like that. There is, well, okay, there is a reference to Bit in Flynn's lair in Legacy when,
Oh, sitting on the
it,
mantle.
yeah,
Yeah.
sitting on the mantle, and I can't remember if it's Sam who looks at that or I think it's Clue and his minions when they're looking through the books, and like I think Clue picks up Bit
and it's almost like a moment where he's remembering where he used to have Bit with him. And I also believe in the novelization of Tron. I've never read it, but I read this on IMDb. Is that the bit that shows up in the recognizer with Flynn is the same bit that had been with Clue, and so that's why that bit recognizes him and says, and when he's saying, "Where's your program? Is he going to miss you?" No. I'm your program.
I am your
yes.
program.
Another mouth to feed.
Right, another mouth to feed. Yeah.
And so yeah, so those are fun lines, and I also kind of like the banter that Sark does sometimes. It's kind of funny for a computer program villain, basically the operating system. That was one thing I loved about Tron 2.0 is it gave a real computer name to who Sark would have been, the kernel, the system kernel, which is a real thing. But they never mentioned that in Tron, probably a good thing to not overwhelm the audience. But, he's the kernel of the operating system. And but, he's, like when he's torturing Dumont, he's like, I should just keep you around to make me laugh. And or telling Tron, we should, you and I would have made a great team, and things like that. He brought some good personality to that character, even though it's running around in these weird tight suits and being filmed in black and white. It's kind of a goofy thing to have been doing, but
yeah. When you look at the buttons on that move, like it just looks strange because it's sitting on like seesaw, like horses sitting there, like they're supposed to be on the light cycles and things, and yeah, behind the scenes stuff always ruins movies.
Yeah, it does. It ruins the magic, and like I said, if you ever have the free time, watching the behind the scenes stuff on Tron it's really amazing what they had to go through to do that. And I know the director, he got a bit frustrated, I think, with Jeff Bridges or maybe Bruce Boxleitner, because the discs were just frisbees with those lines drawn, those circles drawn on them, and so they had to throw frisbees and catch frisbees constantly. And
well, as I understand it, I think Dan Shore was actually really good with frisbees or something. Like he had an ability to do tricks with them.
Right.
So, and he actually does one in the first Tron where he's flipping it around.
Yep. And I guess there was a little goof. I did not notice this until I read the IMDb goofs part. But when he was flipping that disc around, he wasn't wearing gloves. And then in the scene where it shows him stopping, where it's pulled back, he is wearing gloves. It's like, whoops.
Okay. It happens.
And have you ever watched the deleted scenes?
Yes.
And so I the only thing I remember is that Tron and Yori have their apartment, or they go to Yori's apartment or something.
That is one of the saddest omissions from the movie. I think that entire sequence should have been left in, like especially when she flips the switch and everything starts lighting up and everything. That looks so great. Why would they get rid of that?
Yeah. I'm also surprised that they cut it, just because they obviously animated a lot of it, and so it's like that took probably hundreds of hours to do. But sometimes things, I guess, just don't work to what the director's wanting to do at the end of the day, and so that's why they cut stuff out. But that's the only one that I really remember. To answer your question is, I guess I should be using this feature, so my apologies that I haven't been doing that. But in Tron, that scene in the corporate office where Dillinger's using the table screen to access stuff, did that inspire table arcade cabinets? Not quite. It might be the other way around, because cocktail cabinets had been in use since 1974, I believe, or 73. One of the earliest, I think the first one was Elimination by Atari or Key Games, as they had a separate division called Key Games, but they developed that and then turned that into Quadra-Pong. And then the tank game, arcade game that I mentioned earlier, that also was available primarily as a cocktail cabinet first, and then later an upright. But trying to think if there is a cocktail cabinet that looks like Dillinger's desk. That would be pretty cool. That's something that I've always wanted to, or I guess that's something to throw out there is if there could be one thing that you could get from the Tron universe, what would it be? I would say Dillinger's desk would be my thing. Although it's hard to choose between that and a light cycle, like a real world working light cycle.
I wouldn't mind having like a lit up identity disc. That'd be kind of cool.
Sure. Just don't lose your disc, or you'll be.
I'll be derez.
Yeah. And I do like what they did in Legacy with the discs because they really showed them, being used, and like Clue being able to pull the disc out and then seeing information there, and so that was a great way to expand the lore, I suppose, on that.
Because it holds like all the memories of the programs, and so they don't make that clear in the first one that you can actually physically look at the memories and things.
Right, just never came up. Well, it's almost like Ghostbusters. Did you know that in the very first movie they never used the term proton pack? But as kids, everybody knew that they were proton packs. I think it might have been from
didn't they just call them unlicensed nuclear accelerators or whatever?
Yeah, that's something like that. Well, it's in the elevator when they're saying, well, each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator. Why should I worry? Each of us is wearing an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on his back. And, there's that great scene where Egon turns on.
And then they just kind of slink back. They're like,
Ghostbusters is another movie that I watched all the time. My mom got so sick and tired of me watching that I think she threw out the tape or erased over it. And so,
whoa, okay.
Yeah. You can go ahead and talk about something else. Just helping somebody here.
Oh, I was going to say earlier, any of you out there haven't seen Top Gun Maverick yet, go see it. It's great. I'm only linking it to this discussion because the director of that movie did Tron Legacy, but it's really cool, and I think you'd like it. I'm really hoping that the whole theater experience comes back again. People want to go to the movie theaters. I'm hoping that the new Avatar movie will really bring people back to going to movies again, and because I miss it. It's something that I used to do all the time, and the pandemic hit, just really messed everything up. But that's why Tom Cruise said, we're gonna keep this one in the theater. You got to go to the theater to see it. So I highly recommend it. 2 thumbs up.
All right, I'm back. Get my...
What are your favorite characters in let's talk about Tron Legacy for a second. Just about what did you think of Cora?
I liked her. I guess that was one thing that I also originally was kind of disappointed in with Legacy was they set up the ISOs, but they didn't really, I don't know, it didn't seem to, I guess they expanded a bit on them as to their importance in the Tron Uprising cartoon. And so that helped build the lore a little more as to their importance. I liked, I'm trying to think, there wasn't anybody that I didn't like that I recall in Legacy.
I wasn't particularly nuts about that second guy in command with Clue that's just so meager and that guy.
Yeah, the Weasley guy. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, the Weasley guy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I did like his performance because he's obviously trying to grovel and everything, and it was satisfying when Clue took him out, and because he's obviously just his loyalties flip so easily and everything. But yeah, I should have rewatched Legacy too recently, but it's been, I don't know, maybe over a year since I've seen that.
I like some of the mechanical designs they got going on that one, like the vehicle that Cora is driving when she saves Sam from the grid.
Yeah.
That's a really cool vehicle.
rest in peace to Sid Mead, the designer who came up with the
Oh, that's
original
right. Yes.
designs. He died, I think, last year. But he also did
Yeah.
lots of conceptual art for all sorts of movies. That's one thing I love looking. There's a website out there called Tron Sector. It's Tron-sector.com, where they have a lot of media, and checking out some of the concept art. Just they did some awesome stuff. That's one of the things that I think I really enjoyed about both Tron movies is the sense of exploration and seeing these imaginative, creative worlds inside the computer. And just I remember as a kid being like, oh gosh, I'd love to see more of this place or and whatnot, or what else could be in here, what would this represent inside the computer, that sort of thing. And yeah, but again, if you ever can get the chance, Tron Uprising does get into that more, because since it was a full season show, it gives you a lot more episodes to explore things like that. And
Yeah, I really need to be watching that.
yeah, one of these days you can. But
Well, so what about like I know we kind of touched base on the de-aging stuff, but what do you think about like the effects overall for Tron Legacy? Like I know that they tried adding some things like you wouldn't think it, but I guess apparently the tires on the vehicles in the computer world can generate smoke and stuff like that. And
sure.
you know,
Yeah, I enjoyed them. I enjoyed everything about the that sort of those touches, but mainly the voxel sort of thing where things break down into cubes. Just I think they did a fantastic
yeah,
job with that. Or when programs would be derezzed or walls would be shattered, stuff like that. It's just like I said, there are certain things that I guess I would have liked to have seen more of that were in the original, but also expanding on things like you mentioned. They had the bar, they had trains, sort of in that one. Of course, they copied the Sark's carrier sort of thing. Granted, that was one thing in Legacy that just didn't make a whole lot of sense. Is like, how would, if Clue was digitized into the real world, how would that really have worked? It's like it was, the laser aperture was inside of a basement, and so
yeah.
would it have
I wondered
just
about that.
exploded into full size and blown up the whole place? Or
I
who
guess it's a good thing
knows?
they didn't get into that.
Right. Oh, see you later, Bushin. He mentions here um, favorite scene of all Tron and all sci-fi is from Sam Flynn prepping to first battle with Rinsler. The imagery, music, and dialogue pacing. Yeah. The Disc War. I love the music in that one. That's one of my favorite parts of the Daft Punk track. And I also love that scene too, because it's great, because he's obviously doesn't know what he's doing really, and he's able to survive. He sees those other programs getting taken out and quickly learns that this is very deadly and has to adapt to that very quickly. And that's really well done. And of course, with Rinsler Tron in that battle, trying to survive there, that yeah, just really well done. So I also, that's one of my, as I recall from Legacy, that's also probably my favorite scene in Legacy too. I guess I kind of tie it into the light cycles, which happens pretty quickly after that. Of course, there is the discussion between him and Clue first, but yeah. So thank you for that. Thank you for your super chat. So I'll put that up there to highlight again, and also. Yeah, we'll see about maybe doing a Last Starfighter thing maybe sometime soon. I mean, I know that there has been a sequel to the Last Starfighter in development hell for years, well over a decade, and there was at one point a new movie that was going to be called The Son of the Last Starfighter, but it just never got off the ground. There's at several points, I think there have been several different plans for a TV show on the last Starfighter. Although one of them that I heard about,
I heard about that.
I'm glad it didn't get made because the guy who was writing it was saying, "Oh, this is going to have nothing to do with video games." It's like, then you don't understand Last Starfighter.
Why not?
And so I'm glad
That's so dumb,
your project didn't go anywhere. It sounded like he was going to do like a buddy cop show in space, and
they had brought it up again fairly recently, and also attached to it some beautiful concept art that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Now it's been a while, and I can't remember that. I think it was the guy who did stuff for Rogue One was looking at it. But by my understanding, a lot of the problem with the last Starfighter has been that there's something wrong. Something with the rights on the movie have been very complicated and very difficult to sort out, as I guess multiple people own the rights to it or something like that, or certain elements.
Yeah,
because
there was something between like Universal and Lorimar.
Yeah, and so that's why it just never has gotten off the ground, and so it's too bad. Now, actually, I forgot to bring this up back when we were talking about the video game, because there was a Last Starfighter video game released for the Atari 8-bit computer line, and it was originally supposed to be. Or am I getting this wrong? It might have been a prototype.
So,
because there was
an N64 game.
Oh, there was.
Or not N64. There was a Nintendo game, an 8-bit Nintendo game. They called it The Last Starfighter, but what it actually was just a reskin of another game called
You too.
Uridium.
Oh, okay. I've seen that. So they changed. It was going to be Last Starfighter, and then they changed it.
No, it was Uridium originally, and then they changed it over to make it The Last Starfighter by just changing sprites around and making references to the movie and stuff. But it had like a really kind of 8-bit rendition of the theme song, and I owned it. I never really liked it that much, and then I learned much later on that it was already a pre-existing game. They just slapped the name on. So.
I gotcha. Okay, and just looking here really quick, there was a Last Starfighter game being developed for the Atari computer line, like the 400, 800 computers, and it was practically done, but because the movie...
Is that what they turned into Star Raiders 2?
Yes. Yeah, and so that became Star Raiders 2, which kind of didn't really fit with what Star Raiders was. It's kind of weird, but... I prefer the original Star Raiders myself. I mean, the graphics on it are a lot better. But, hi, how's it going?
Hey.
I can help you.
Can I pay with card here?
Yeah, you can. You can buy tokens.
Oh, here?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me check it out.
Sure, no problem. No problem. Yep, you're welcome. Well, it looks like our stream is pretty much come to an end. So again, happy birthday to Tron. Happy 40th anniversary to Tron. By Disney, and so hopefully they will stop having such a hard-on for Star Wars and Marvel to at least give some love to Tron at some point here soon. But
give me just one sec.
Okay, we're gonna finish up here since I think we're getting busier anyways. So being here at the arcade, gotta take care of business, and we've spent almost 2 hours talking Tron anyways, so I think I'll just let Brian finish what he needs to finish here and let him finish us off. But yeah, I've long been a big fan of Tron for all the various stated reasons, and have enjoyed it. Yeah, I recognize it's not a perfect movie. It's not the best movie ever made, but it's something with heart. Yeah.
Do you have any machine that has the Galaxy?
Galaga? Yeah, it's on the other side there. It's not on, but I can turn on anything.
Yeah. All right. I want to do some code for that.
Okay. How much do you want to do?
Okay, hold on.
Sure, no problem.
Good.
Okay, well, let's finish up.
Well, yeah, that was great.
Yeah.
I had a good time chatting with you about Tron.
Yeah. Any last things to say about Tron before we go?
If you haven't seen either of those movies, go see them. At least you'll know what we're talking about. And
Right.
I think we should definitely do another one where we talk about the last Starfighter. Yeah, you
Sure,
got me
sure.
thinking about that. I think we should do it.
We'll figure it out. We can do it soon. I mean, I don't know that we need to wait 2 years for the 40th anniversary of Last Starfighter to do
Right,
that.
yeah.
Because, yeah, that's still a ways away. But maybe sometime soon, if anybody would be interested, we can do that. And I'll have to rewatch it too and have it fresh on the mind. Well,
That's
thank
like my
you
second
for
favorite movie, so I would definitely know
right
enough
after
about
Tron.
that one as well. Yeah, so.
Okay,
All
that
right.
works. Well, thank you, Brian, and thank you for watching. Thank you for the super chats. Really appreciate that. And we will see you guys around.
See you later. Thank you.